Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets project in Practical Sheets. Today we're going to build a to-do list. Something that may seem at the beginning so simple can become much more complex because we can add many different things depending on your productivity style. We're going to try to do a very simple thing, but then it can evolve. For example, if you are a productivity nerd, as me, then you may want to explore things like GTD or other productivity systems that start from a to-do list, build more complex systems with different lists depending not only on your projects, but on the different stages of your to-do. You could have, for example, one list for the things that only you can do. There may be a list of things that other people may do, but you want to keep track of it, or things that you want to do, but not right now. So I don't want to get ahead of myself because this may be another project to build a GTD system. But for now, we're going to do a simple to-do list and try to improve it. The most important thing is it is a system that we use consistently. It may be the most difficult thing to build with a lot of macros, with a lot of formulas, but if we don't use it on a regular basis, then what is the point? So let's begin. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to build a file from a template. Is this from this template gallery? I'm going to open this to-do list, which is a template that Google Sheets gives to us, so we can have some idea of what we could do. This is a very simple template where we can write a new task and put a date on it, 6/7, and then write task 2. And if we click on this checkbox, then it will add some conditional formatting, and here it has a special formula where we can know how many tasks we have and how many tasks we have complete. This is it. A very simple guide for our to-do lists. But I think we could do a bit better. So let's begin. Again, we'll try, as always, to do as simple as possible, and then this could evolve in time. So the first problem I find with this, I know that I always tell you that the simpler, the better. But in this case, I think there may be some things missing. We can begin with the task or the activity, or however you want to call it. Then we have the date. But what is the date? I can have 3 different types of dates. I could have the date when I registered the task. That for me, it's important to know that today my boss told me that I have to do this report. Because if in a month I haven't done it, I know that it's been a month, This is the first. The second one is when is it due? For example, a meeting has a due date of November 11, for example, and if we are in November 13, then it doesn't matter if I didn't go to it because now I cannot go. So it's a cancelled task. And the third date is the date where I actually do the task. So I'm not saying we have to have the 3 dates. I'm saying we have to be clear of what date I'm talking about. Let's say here we have the due date. Next, this checkbox, I think this is right. Let's call it done. Again, it's a very nice system, the check, but there may be some other states. For example, cancelled or postponed or transferred to another person. I don't know. So this is very simplistic, but we can begin with that. Then there are a lot of other things we could put. We could put a responsible. We could put a place. We could put a category. Let's put here responsible. I'm going to add some zoom so you can see better what I'm doing. Again, we could have a lot of other different columns, but we could add this in the future. For now, let's just add a done date, and we could move this responsible before done. We're going to add some tasks and set up. So let's begin with this, with some simple tasks. We could add here, let's add the third date I told you about. This is the setup date or the initial date. For me, it's important to know the date where I came up with the idea or with the task, because then I can have a dashboard, and one of the criteria for ordering it is the initial date. Because if there's something that I have from 1 year ago and I haven't done it, maybe it's not that important and I should remove it, or I should do it immediately. This is the first thing. The second thing is that it is the due date, that not all tasks will have a due date. For example, this reserved for Maria's birthday may have a due date, because if Maria's birthday is 11th of November, so the due date should be maybe 5th. And this buy a book may not have a date, but this buy the turkey for Thanksgiving, maybe I should buy it before Thanksgiving, and not even Thanksgiving, but at least 4 or 5 days before, because you have to cook it and there may be out of stock or whatever. So let's say 11/20, and here it's, I forget that the dates are backwards here from Latin America, that here we have day, month, year, and the US we have month, day, year. Then we have the responsible. At the date of recording this video, Sheets hasn't rolled out this new feature that is called the Smart Ships, where I could have a person here in the responsible when I click the add button. So hopefully in the second and third video, if I do it, then we can have it. For now, we could just put an email maybe, or just the person. From a list, I could have here, it's Sebastian. In this case, everything is Sebastian, but maybe I have an assistant, and this may be my assistant, or maybe if Maria is my sister, I could tell my brother, John, to help me do the reservation. I don't know. Finally, going back to my dates, I could have this as a data validation. I'm going to do this. This done column may be at the beginning, a checkbox like this one, very simple one. I'm going to go down, Control Shift down, and I'm going to do, I could do this both in two ways. First is insert checkbox, but I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to go to data validation. Here I'm going to select checkbox, and I'm going to use custom cell values. I don't like this true and false, but it's a personal thing, because in the future, when we're going to do some code, some Google Apps script, some macros, I prefer to do it another way. So in checked, I'm going to write done, and on unchecked, I'm going to leave it blank. We could select reject input and save. So here you can see that when I don't select it, it doesn't say anything. Here, when I don't select it, it says false, and I don't like this. Again, it's a personal thing, but we could find the usefulness of this when we do more advanced stuff in the same project. And when I check it, it just says done. Here, when I checked it, it said true. So this is better for me because it tells me something. True and false doesn't tell me anything. But if I have here done, when I'm going to dashboard or something, it tells me more about the field. So this is where things begin to become interesting, in the sense that I could start adding some code. When I write something here, I want this initial date to automatically appear. It is a very good approximation of when I thought of it, or when my wife told me about something that needs to be done, or when my boss assigned me a task. So when I write it, I want here that an initial date is put on. This is called a timestamp. And then when I'm done, when I put this checklist on, I also want that the done date is automatically filled up with today's date. This may not be exactly the case. Sometimes I could put done, but I did it actually 3 or 4 or 5 days ago, but I hadn't had time to fill out my to-do list. So I would also like the opportunity to write it down manually. It's not a difficult code. I'm going to go to extensions, AppScript. I think I can close this for the moment. This function, I'm going to call it timestamp. And it's going to be a very simple timestamp. The most difficult part of the timestamp is to check out where I'm standing. So there are a couple of ways of doing it. If you're not familiar with Google Apps Script, I'm going to try to go very simple and very step-by-step on what I'm going to do. I don't like to use these event types and trigger types for a beginner's project. So what we're going to do is first to tell my script to look for the cell where the user is typing or has typed something. For example, if I type here task and I click enter, when I click enter or tab or something, then this cell I want to be recorded somewhere. Okay. For this, I need a couple of lines. The first one is spreadsheet app and then get active spreadsheet. This is a method for letting know my Google Apps Script of what file I'm talking about. I could store this in a variable we're going to call worksheet, or WS is a common standard in this Google Sheets project. And then in my WS, I'm going to call the method get active cell or get active range. They're very similar. Let's call get active cell. This is the cell. In this example, it would be A7. So let's call this active cell. I need to know 2 things about this active cell, or maybe 3. The first one is in which column I'm in, and the second one is in which row I'm in. This I can do it with, for my active cell that I already called, I'm going to do active cell dot get row for my row and get column for my column. Active cell dot get column. And we're going to store it first in an active row variable and then in an active column variable. Another useful thing may be the value. What did I write? Maybe it's not important to know what did I write, but just to know that it's not a blank. That when I delete, then I don't do anything. But if I write anything that is not blank, then I will do my timestamp. So here, I'm going to do a active value, let's call it. That will be active cell dot get value. That's it. Well, maybe there's a last thing I need, and it's the sheet where I'm at. So active cell dot get sheet. And I just need the name of this sheet. Let's call this variable active sheet. Why do I need this active sheet? Here I only have 1 sheet, but in the case that will happen that I have 2 or 3 or 5, then I need to know that I'm standing in this particular sheet. Let's call this ToDo with a space if you want. Okay, so this is the cell I'm at. But I could also have the cells I want it to be. In which row, in which column do I want the user to be to trigger my timestamp? For example, for the initial date, I want the initial date to be triggered when the task name is set up. Let's call this task name. When I write in the column 1. And for my done date, I want the column to be this 5th one. When I check this, the done date will trigger. So we're going to put some constants. The first one will be, let's call this task name column. It will be number 1. Then let's put done column, and this will be number 5. Let's add another constant that is the name of the sheet. That in my case is ToDo inside quotation marks. And finally, I could put here this done value. Let's call it done text. That in my case is done, all lowercase. So now I have the two things where my user or myself, I'm standing here, and then with the columns where I want the user to stand for my timestamp to trigger. So now we're going to compare this to this. If this is equal to this, then let's do the timestamp. So this we do it with an if function. I'm going to compare things. First, the active sheet. Let's call this a better name is active sheet name. So if my active sheet name equals my sheet name, this is the first good condition to go ahead. Double ampersand, the second condition is that the active column equals my task name column, or double this vertical line, I don't know the official name, or that the active column equals to my done column. Okay, and we can group these two conditions with a parenthesis, and the final condition is that active value is something. It's a value, it's a text. This is why it was useful to leave, when unchecked, leave this blank. And the same, if I delete here and this is blank, I don't want my timestamp to trigger. Okay? Before moving on, I would like to explain a bit this if statement, because sometimes I forget that not all of you are experts in Google Apps Script or in coding or in JavaScript. So just a couple of thoughts about this if statement. So the if statement, it's very common in programming languages, and it's a condition. So you write if, and inside the parentheses, you put what is the condition that you want to be true in order to do something. This is it. In some languages, you don't use the parentheses, but in this case, and in JavaScript, you use the parentheses to write the arguments or the conditions that need to be true in order to do what comes next in the if. And we can have multiple conditions that are joined by operators. In this case, we have two operators. The AND operator that we put here as double ampersand, that means that all the conditions that are at the left and at the right of the ampersand need to be true for the statements of the if to be executed. And on the other hand, we have the OR operator. There are the two vertical lines. This means that one of the two should be true for the statements of the if to be executed. So we have two possibilities, and here we have them mixed up. So we need mandatory that the active sheet name is equals to the sheet name, that the active value is something, and one of two, that the active column is number 1, that is the column where the task name is, or that the active column is done column, that is number 5, where the checkbox is. Okay? On the other hand, we have the condition that has two things. The variable, in our case, for example, the first one is active sheet name. It should equal the sheet name constant. In this case, we put double equal sign. That means it is equal. We could also put 3 equal sign. This is a more exact way, and it says that the value should be the same and the type of the variable should be the same, but this is an advanced topic. Here we have texts. So we have the equal, or we could have different than. That is exclamation sign and then the equal. And when we have numbers, we could use less than, greater than, and others. Okay, so this is it. This is the parenthesis I wanted to make before moving on. So now, if all this is good, I'm just going to do a simple line, and it's the following. Actually, this I could have separated into lines. The first one is the active sheet. That is this active cell get sheet. And then it will be active sheet get name. Why? Because now what I'm going to do is a simple line where I take my active cell. I may not need this active row, because what I'm going to do is to take my active cell and just offset it one column to the right. You can see that it will work here and it will work here. I just offset it one column to the right and write in that cell my timestamp. So I will say active cell dot offset, and here I'm going to say, here it asks me how many rows down and how many columns right. So no row down, it's the same row, and one column to the right. And then stand in this cell, and here we could set the value of this cell to a new date with this new date method. I'm going to zoom out a bit so it looks better. I forgot here to put another equal sign. Remember that when you compare, you always need to have 2 or 3. You cannot compare with just an equal sign. You need to have 2 or 3. This means compare if it's equal. If I just leave 1, it means assign. Okay, now let's save again, and we're going to run our timestamp. It's going to ask us for some permissions first. Let's review. Okay, let's see. And here you can see that it's working. And if I check this and run it again, it also works here. But if I put some date here and run it, it won't do anything. It will only work in this column and in this column. Okay, the last thing I need is to put a trigger, because I don't want to do this thing all the time. To come here and run it, I want this to run automatically when I write something. So for this, there are 2 ways of doing it. The way we're going to do it is with an onEdit function. This is referred to as a simple trigger, and this specific function tells script to run or to check every time I edit a cell in my Google Sheets. So I'm going to tell my script that it should run this timestamp function every time a cell is edited. So I just write my timestamp function inside my onEdit function, save, and then let's do a second test task, and it works. And if I check under task, it works. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do initially. I didn't want to go straight to Google Apps Script in my first video, but I changed my mind in the middle of the video. I'm going to put some format. I'm going to delete some columns with Ctrl-Shift-Right. I select all my columns with Ctrl-Alt-. I delete all the columns, so it just looks a bit nicer. Finally, I'm going to add some conditional formatting similar to the template we saw at the beginning of the video. I'm not such a fan of this. I prefer to do it another way, but I think we will cover this in the next video. For now, let's just keep it simple with a conditional formatting. I'm going to select all this range from A2 to F, final F. Let's go to Format, Conditional Formatting, and we're going to apply to this range, and the format rule will be the following. It's going to be a custom formula. Let's go to the first row so that we can take a look at what we're doing. Again, format, conditional formatting, and let's return to the format we were doing. So it will be a custom formula, and the custom formula will be the following. It needs to be when this E column is done. So I'm going to put an equal. I'm going to start with an equal sign and then put E2 equals to, in quotation marks, done. But it doesn't seem to be working. So I'm going to put here in front of my E of my column a $sign. This is vital because it says always look for the column E and leave the column E blocked or fixed. I may put it here in a green color, or maybe a bit, and the text may be in a similar green, so that I don't have to focus on these done tasks, but on the tasks to be done. I don't know if you understand me, my intention. So if I put another one in done, it automatically puts to this new format. I actually don't like this a lot because here I only have 5, but when I have 8, 10, 100 tasks, I prefer to do it another way. One way could be to just, once I check it, it copies and pastes this row to another sheet, or it just deletes it, maybe another option. Another option is to have a filter, because what I could do manually is to select all my columns, do a filter, and just remove everything that is done. The problem with this is that if I check a new one, then I have again to rerun this filter all the time. So maybe we could do it with a macro or automatically, so that once I check it, it just filters it or hides it. This may be another possibility, but we'll look at in a new video. If someone looks at this video anytime, or if you give me some comments, then we could do a second part. So I think you could work with this for now, but I think we could do a lot of improvements in the future. So as always, you can find the template in the Patreon page, or you can support me just subscribing to the channel and clicking on the notification buttons so you can be aware when there's a new video each week. Thank you so much. See you next time.